What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Justin and you are watching That Christian Vlogger. Today we're going to be continuing a series of videos with my friend Matthias, who in addition to being a blogger, speaker, podcaster, and Christian also happens to identify as gay. And I need to be honest with you guys, out of the 4 conversations that we recorded together, today's video is the one that I have the most mixed feelings about. This is the one that I'm the most unsure about, which says something because we've covered some very serious ground over the last couple of videos. But the reason why I have such mixed feelings about today's video is because out of about the 12 hours or so that Matthias and I got to hang out together, the things that were said at the very end of this video were easily the most difficult, the most hard, and the most challenging things for me to hear personally. You see, my hope for the church is that it would be the ultimate expression of God's love and grace to the world, that no matter what your background or your history was, that you could find a place in the church where you feel like you belong. But as you will see in today's video, that may not always be possible. So I say all of that to say, get ready, because this conversation will be very challenging. But if you're ready and if you're excited for the challenge, go ahead and smash that like button, share the link with a friend, and let's get to it. I want to ask you a question because I have a friend who's in kind of a dilemma or a challenge, and I want to kind of hear your perspective on it. My friend works for a church that is not gay affirming. That is to say that they hold a more traditional stance. They say that, to be in a same-sex relationship and to be married much more is definitely not what God wants. And so she's telling me about this experience of this couple that she's invited to their church. They've been attending the church for well over a year, week after week after week. And I asked her, how is it that the church is treating them? Are they treating them well? Are they like on the edge? And she says that they, quote, love them. I thought that was super cool. But then she was asked a question by this couple that's been coming to church. And they asked, does the church know that we are gay? Because when she responded yes, they were like so surprised. They couldn't believe it. They asked the question, why do they still love us so much? When you hear questions like that, when you hear about this couple who's been going to outreach, going to socials, they volunteer for the church, and their question is, why do they love us so much? How does that make you feel?
There are 2 things that come to mind. One, I think it's a really encouraging story to hear, because I think in so many churches, like if a gay couple were to walk in,
they don't get loved.
They don't get loved. Yeah. They get the looks, they get the kind of like, oh, you're welcome here, but like, what are you doing here? Like, because we're not used to that in a lot of church contexts. So, that's encouraging to hear. I think from the perspective of someone who's gay, like, and what I kind of hear in that, like, well, don't they know we're gay? Like, is kind of like, what's the catch? Like, when is the other shoe gonna drop? Like, what's happening here that's so confusing? Because I think we so often are waiting for, like, Christians are really good at showing love and then kind of dropping a bomb.
And now we want you to pay tithe or something like that, right?
Right. And so what I hear in that is kind of like what is going on here, and like, can we really actually believe that we're welcome, that we're actually wanted, that we're actually loved, like, and I wonder that. Like, I wonder that on their sakes. Like, is another shoe going to drop at some point? Like, is there going to be a point you are loved up until you want to serve on the worship team? Like, that kind of thing. And that's a question that only that church will be able to answer. But I totally understand that. So it's encouraging, and like, I wonder what's happening.
I remember when I first heard this experience, I was so happy. It's like, wow, here is a church that I think is doing it like better than most. Maybe it's not the ideal yet, but it's certainly better than most, that this couple could come and feel accepted and welcomed. It's been over a year, so you've been through quite a bunch of things with a particular church family by that time, and they still feel loved, they still feel welcome. They're coming back and back and back. And to me, I was just like, man, if we as a church, just at level 1, we could learn to treat all people, whether they are gay or straight, whether they happen to be rich or homeless or any other categories. If the church could be a place that is known for extending the love and the grace of God, irrespective of what happens, that would be absolutely amazing. That would be a huge leap forward. But then I also, like, after all that joy and elation, I was actually discouraged at the same time that the norm is why. why is it that they love us? Because that means that by and large, where they go, they are not loved.
Right.
And I'm wondering, is that something that you have experienced? I know that you live here, we're in Seattle for this video, so it's a much more open-minded place by and large, but is that something that you've experienced in your own life?
Totally. And I think the thing that I've experienced the most is that we kind of call it in my world like the welcome mat Christians, of like, we're welcoming but not affirming. And that world of where you walk into a church and you're like, or you reach out to a pastor and say like, hey, I'm gay, like, am I welcome at your church? Like, usually it turns into like this almost performative welcome of like,
we want to make sure you know
like
you're
you
welcome.
are welcome here. And like I was saying, that welcome only extends up until a point, and that the devastation that then kind of comes out of that, I'm not actually welcome in, like, yeah, you may be saying I'm welcome, but like, and I know it starts,
welcome with an asterisk.
right? And it starts getting into the really sticky conversations around sin and like when we talk about church leadership and serving in church roles that I know like Scripture does kind of give us some guidelines on, that devastation that then comes out of, yeah, I'm welcome here, but I can't do all of these things because you view me and the way that I'm living my life as I'm living in this sinful state, and thus I can't serve on the worship team. I can't, whatever. I'm not allowed with the kids to be in nursery. Like, there's so many things that people start bumping up against then, of where then I don't actually feel welcome.
You're allowed to sit in the pew and to pay your tithe.
Right.
But beyond that, you run into a lot of tricky situations if you're not open to overcoming or changing.
Right. Yeah, I started being treated as almost a second-class citizen, and even the people who are open to changing or who are actively struggling with their sexual orientations, even a lot of those people don't have the support or the ability to serve in some larger roles in the church because of their quote-unquote brokenness.
I wrestle with that, and I guess I have to think through what I would hope a church would do in that situation. Do you hold it against a non-affirming church that limits it a little bit, or if you could change something other than changing that they are fully affirming or not, what would you hope from a situation like that? If there's someone who here is a member of a church that is not affirming it, how can they, I guess, meet you halfway somewhat, without them feeling like they're compromising and without you feeling like you're still a second-class citizen? Is there a way for that to happen?
I don't know. Like, that's the bind right there, isn't it? Like, when we sit in those spaces of where one group of us are defining something as sin, and being like an active living in sin and rebellion to God, and another group of us are saying, no, I don't believe that. I don't think I am living in rebellion to God. This is not sinful. When those two theologies bump against each other in very tangible ways, I don't know that there really is a way. I mean, we can have the theoretical conversations, but when it really hits that point of policy, and like, can you serve? Can you do this? Can you work in leadership functions in the church? Can you be a pastor? When those hard lines are drawn, like, I'm not sure there's a way to ease that.
With that being the reality, do you hold that against a body of believers? Do you hold, like, because of that, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I mean, we all have to live within our convictions.
Right.
I think that's fundamentally one of the most important things as a believer, to live within our convictions of what we believe the Spirit has called us to, in a certain standard of living, whatever that standard may be. So I don't think that you, or let me ask, would your advice be to that church that they need to change and that they need to go against what their belief system is? Or have we just reached an impassable road?
Yeah, I think it's one of those both ands of, like, I think ultimately I would ask then churches who hold to those convictions to be very clear up front of not doing the performative welcomeness of, yeah, of course you're welcome here, and then dropping the ball a year later, or whatever, of saying like, yeah, we want you to feel welcome in this church, and like this is what we believe about this, and you won't be able to serve in these capacities, like, and that's where we stand. We're not really willing to budge on that, and then letting that couple, those people, decide whether they want to stay in that community or not, and that's ultimately their choice. Like, and I think it can be hard to kind of let go of that.
But I would venture to guess that if a gay couple had a conversation like that, where the church was clear at the forefront prior to a relationship developing, that they might immediately dismiss them as homophobic, kind of like what our last video was about.
So be it. Like, I mean, that's one of those things that, like, I think you were starting to ask a question, like, do you hold that against those churches? Like, yeah, I do.
You do.
Like, I think that is the result of very harmful theology, and I think it's limiting the work of God in our world. Like, I hold that against people. Like, can I do that gracefully? Like, yeah. Like, do I think they're lesser people? Do I not, like, want to hang out with those people? Like, I mean, I have to put boundaries and safeties around myself, but like, do I think you're a terrible person for holding that? No. But do I hold it against people? In a way, yeah, I do.
It makes it, of course, because it's something that touches to the core of who you are. Now I'm wondering where we go with this.
That's a good question.
Because we hit a big challenge.
I think that's then something that we have to contend with, like in the way that we do our theological work, in the way that we do engage with people. I believe it's up to us in our integrity to be able to then hold those positions and be able to then let go of like some of the consequences of those decisions of when a church chooses to hold to their convictions and believe that they're fully true. That is what God is calling them to do. I respect that. That's great. Then you also have to hold with the consequences, though, of gay people may not want to be in your church, no matter how welcome you say they are, because functionally we feel then we're not actually welcome for who we are as people, because we're bumping against some very core parts of what we believe.
So in my church, the official stance is that I think they use not helpful language in that a practicing homosexual isn't allowed to serve at certain capacities. But if you are someone that has, same-sex attractions, but you're striving for celibacy or overcoming or whatever the language is that they use, then you're fully welcome in the body and you're allowed to serve and things like that. What do you make of a church that has a policy like that?
Yeah, I think. Let me gather my thoughts there for a moment.
The reason why I ask this question is I think that bodies of believers this is why they're a church, is that they get to define what their beliefs are and are not. And if I'm seeking to join someone's, say, club, for a very crude way to point it to describe it, I need to be willing to adhere to kind of the code of ethics or the rules or whatever the case is. So, as a body of believers, as a church denomination or something along those lines, you write out your belief system. And if that's what your belief system is, then that's how you, I guess, that's how you allow things to work out in real life.
I then start framing it as that then starts sounding a lot like conditional love in a way of, as long as you are dealing with your issues in the way that we prescribe, like, then you're welcome, then we love you. But if that person starts going on a journey away from that, and they start kind of being pushed out, like the amount of shame that starts going into that, and the amount of, I think it creates very unhealthy dynamics within churches. I get it, and I understand the hope behind it, and I think the intention behind it is one that is good. I think that the lived outcome, though, of that, especially for queer people, is one ultimately of great damage, though. And that's where I sit.
The way that I guess I would kind of try, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but in my mind where I've made kind of a distinction is what it means to be like welcome into the congregation during times of worship and socializing and fellowship and all that kind of stuff. And then really what it means to be a member, like a baptized member of a church. I think that, in like from my opinion, that it's okay for a church to say, hey, if you're going to be a baptized member of this particular church, these are our beliefs. In the same way that we would say, oh, you know, in a typical Orthodox church, that you must affirm the bodily death and resurrection of Jesus, because this is part of our beliefs. So I think that if you have a church congregation, you can be welcoming to people who don't believe in Jesus in that way, but they can certainly hang out and be a part of the community and all that kind of stuff. But if they want to become a member, you have a certain list of beliefs that to be a member of X denomination or Y denomination means that you affirm these truths.
Right.
How does that seem to?
Absolutely. And I think every faith community has the right and the need to, you know, determine what those things are for every faith community. Like I think that's why we have so many churches, like
totally.
Denominations, like we place emphasis on different things. We find different things within scripture, within tradition, within experience to be important. And so we gravitate towards the people that agree with us. I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think when we play the game of trying to have the cake and eat it too, of like, that's when we run into trouble. I really want gay people at my church. The gay people like are upset about us believing these things. Like, I don't know that you can have that both and of like, I will walk into that church and say, yeah, your beliefs are really harmful. Like, I don't really want to hang out with you guys. Like, I don't believe that this is true. And we kind of have to hold that with some openness, I think. So.
Well, there's no neat way to end this video. I think it's a very challenging thing. I mean, we've kind of come to some difficult moments.
Kind of going back to our last video and talking about like, what if God is working in these lives too? Trust that God will work in those spaces too. Like, when that gay couple doesn't feel welcome and decides to go somewhere else, like, God can still work in their lives, and maybe that place wasn't God's best.
Good. Well, there you guys have it. As with all of the other videos, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts. How do you see the church and queer believers navigating through some of the difficult situations like these? Or is this just one of those areas that you simply have to deal with your beliefs and the consequences of them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Of course, don't forget to check out Matthias' podcast called Queerology, where he shares more of his thoughts on faith and sexuality. Also, if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support more conversations like this, consider becoming a patron and partnering with us. Links to all of the relevant websites will be down below. But until next time, I'm that Christian vlogger, and I want to encourage you to experience faith in the first person. God bless.